darkness wasn't just around her. It was inside her, thick, cold, and breathing. The kind that doesn't wait for you to be ready before it takes everything you love. The rain fell hard that night, but it wasn't the kind that cleansed anything. It was the kind that stung like judgment, slicing through skin, washing away the last traces of warmth from the air. Lyra ran. Her boots hit the wet cobblestones, splashing through puddles that reflected dying torchlight. Her cloak was torn, soaked to her bones, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. Behind her, voices carried through the storm, low, commanding, filled with hunger. Wolves in human form, driven by orders, not mercy. The ancient Roman marketplace stretched before her like a graveyard for the forgotten. Statues of old gods stared down with empty eyes. The air smelled of iron, rain, and fear. Once, this place had been a center of power, where criminals were auctioned beneath marble arches and crowds screamed for punishment. Now, only ghosts lingered, echoes of pain whispering through the cracks of ruined stone. She pressed her back against a broken column, clutching her satchel of herbs to her chest as though it could shield her from the world. Her fingers shook. The bruises on her wrists burned under the metal cuffs that hadn't fully come off. She could taste blood in her mouth, hers, someone else's, she didn't know anymore. For a moment, she closed her eyes and listened. To the storm, to her heartbeat, to the soft crack of thunder rolling over the hills. And in that heartbeat of silence, she remembered. The smell of pine and home. The sound of laughter before the accusations. The warmth of belonging before it all turned to ash. Her pack had called her healer once. Now they called her curse. She had saved lives, mended wounds, called on the silver flame that ran in her blood to heal even the dying. But when that same flame had erupted beyond her control and burned her Alpha's son to cinders, they didn't see a healer anymore. They saw a monster. Her name, once spoken with trust, became a warning. Lyra, the witch of the silver flame. And so she ran, night after night, through forests, through cities, through the endless ache of not belonging anywhere. Until she found herself here, in the ruins where Rome's cruelty still lingered, and the storm itself seemed to want her gone. Another sound broke the rhythm of her heartbeat. A growl. Low, deep, not human. She froze, breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted across the broken market. The shadows moved, not with the wind, but with intention. Her pulse quickened, and she felt that familiar, unwelcome heat rise in her chest. The silver flame. It always came when she was afraid, when she lost control. She fought it back, whispering through gritted teeth, "Not now, please, not now." A flash of lightning revealed footprints, massive, clawed, fresh. Her heart thudded so hard it felt like it would tear through her ribs. She crouched lower behind the column, her soaked cloak sticking to her skin. Her fingers brushed the wet marble, trying to find balance, to steady herself against the terror climbing her spine. Voices echoed again. She's close. Spread out. She can't hide forever. She bit down on her trembling lip, tasting iron again. She wanted to scream, to fight, to burn the world down. But she had done that once, and she still carried the ghosts of it. Lightning again. A figure moved through the storm, tall, slow, deliberate. Not one of the soldiers. This presence was different. Heavy, commanding, ancient. Even without seeing his face, she could feel the air shift around him, like the world itself knew his name. The figure paused. Turned slightly. And though his eyes were clouded white, as if carved from fog, he looked straight at her hiding place. Lyra's breath caught. He shouldn't be able to see her. No one could. She had masked her scent with herbs, her aura with silver ash. And yet this man, or beast, stood facing her with the calm certainty of someone who had always known where she'd be. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Her body betrayed her, trapped between fear and fascination. The stranger spoke, his voice rough, low, but oddly gentle. You shouldn't be here. She gripped the dagger hidden in her satchel. Neither should you. The faintest smile crossed his lips. Maybe not. Thunder rumbled, shaking the ground beneath them. The rain grew harder, washing away the last light from the torches. For a moment, all she could hear was the storm, and his breathing, steady, calm, too calm for someone standing in a battlefield. She saw the scars running down his arms, faint lines that shimmered when lightning flashed. Chains hung from his wrists, broken but recent. He was no ordinary man. He tilted his head slightly, his blind eyes focusing on something unseen. "They hunt you," he said quietly. "But you already knew that." Lyra swallowed, her throat tight. "Who are you?" He took a step closer. "Someone who once believed in mercy." The words hit her harder than she expected. Because mercy was something she'd stopped believing in a long time ago. The wind caught her cloak and ripped it aside, revealing the bruises, the blood, the faint shimmer of the silver mark on her wrist, the sign of her curse. His head tilted again, nostrils flaring slightly as if scent told him more than sight ever could. "You're the one they call the witch," he said, not as accusation but as fact. Her grip on the dagger tightened. "And you're blind. Seems we both have our curses." He didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't threaten. Just stood there in the rain, his voice a mix of pain and calm. "Blindness is peace compared to what I've seen." For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Then, in the distance, the soldiers' voices grew louder again. The sound of metal against stone, the snapping of wolves' claws. He turned his face toward the noise, his jaw tightening. "They'll find you soon," he said. "And when they do, they won't give you a chance to speak." Lyra looked toward the far archway. It was too far. She wouldn't make it. Not in this rain. Not bleeding, exhausted, hunted. She wanted to believe she could fight her way out again, but she knew what would happen if she tried. The flame would come. And once it did, there'd be nothing left of her humanity. Her mind screamed to run. Her heart whispered to stay. The stranger lifted his face to the sky, the rain dripping from his lashes. "Stay behind me." Lyra hesitated. "Why?" He turned toward her, his sightless eyes glowing faintly in the stormlight. "Because even a blind alpha can smell death when it's near." The words rooted her to the ground. Alpha. The realization hit her like a blade. No ordinary man. Not just a stray shifter. He was one of them, a leader, fallen or forgotten, she couldn't tell. Lightning split the sky, and the storm exploded into chaos. Figures burst through the archway, soldiers with torches and blades, eyes burning with the hunt. They saw her. She saw them. Everything happened at once. The blind alpha stepped forward, barehanded, the air around him pulsing with raw dominance. The soldiers slowed, instinctively, fearfully, like prey sensing the true predator among them. The alpha raised his head, and though he could not see them, he moved with perfect precision. Every motion spoke of power restrained, danger controlled. Lyra crouched behind him, clutching her satchel, torn between disbelief and awe. One of the soldiers shouted, "The witch belongs to the council." "She belongs to no one," the alpha replied. His voice was calm. Deadly calm. The ground seemed to vibrate under his words. The storm roared louder, wind circling them like a living thing. Lyra could feel her power stir in response, the silver flame pressing against her chest like something alive. The soldiers lunged. The alpha moved like a shadow split from the night, silent, lethal. Chains whipped through the air, claws glinted in flashes of lightning, and the scent of iron filled the marketplace again. One by one, the hunters fell. Not dead, just broken enough to never rise against him again. When the last one ran, the alpha turned his head toward Lyra, breathing hard. His knuckles bled where chains had cut his skin. The rain washed the blood away, but not the story it told. She stared at him, speechless. "Why?" she whispered. He turned toward her voice, his eyes unfocused but full of something she hadn't seen in anyone for years, recognition. "Because I've been waiting for you." Lyra froze. Her heart pounded. You don't even know me. Don't I? He took a slow step closer. I know the scent of silver flame. I know what it means to be hunted by those you once called family. The rain softened for the first time that night, falling quieter around them as though the storm itself was listening. Lyra looked at him, this broken, blind alpha who had just saved her life, and saw not a savior but a mirror, someone carrying his own ghosts, his own curses. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. But deep inside her, the flame whispered, this is only the beginning. Because the night hadn't truly ended yet. Somewhere in the ruins, something ancient had awakened, something watching, waiting, breathing in rhythm with the storm. And as thunder cracked once more, Lyra felt it, her power stirring, his energy shifting, and a bond forming in silence, as fragile as breath but strong enough to change everything. Her name was Lyra. His was Cale. And before dawn came, both would burn for a destiny neither asked for, but couldn't escape. If you're new to Sophie's Romance Collections, subscribe and join us. Because here, every heartbeat tells a story of fate, fire, and forbidden love. The storm didn't stop for anyone. It roared louder, swallowing the world whole, until it felt like the heavens themselves wanted to wash every sin off the face of the earth. Lyra's cloak clung to her skin, heavy with rain and fear, her pulse drumming against her throat as she tried to steady her breath. The dagger trembled in her hand. And then, he stepped out of the dark. Cale. The blind alpha. He didn't move like a man who couldn't see. He moved like the storm answered to him. Each footstep was deliberate, grounded, and unnervingly calm. The wind curved around him, almost afraid to touch him, as if it too remembered what he was capable of. Lyra blinked against the downpour, barely believing her eyes. He was taller than she imagined, his shoulders broad beneath a drenched black cloak, his hair slick against his temples. His head was tilted slightly, as though listening to something only he could hear. Chains still hung from his wrists, heavy, rusted, a cruel reminder of captivity. Yet somehow, they didn't make him look weak. They made him look dangerous. Then, his voice cut through the rain like a blade. Low, calm, and heavy with knowing. Lyra. The sound of her name from his lips froze her in place. It wasn't possible. No one should know her name out here, not when she'd burned her trail and buried her past beneath ashes and false names. She raised her dagger higher, her voice breaking through the storm. How do you know me? He didn't flinch. Didn't turn his head. Didn't even move his hands from where they hung loosely at his sides. Instead, he drew in a slow, quiet breath, like he was tasting the air between them. Because your scent carries sorrow, he said softly, and silver flame. The words hung in the air, intimate and haunting all at once. Silver flame. No one else knew about that. Not even her former pack. Not the soldiers who hunted her. The silver flame was the mark of her curse. The strange power that flickered in her veins when she was near death, when rage and mercy collided inside her heart. Lyra's throat tightened. He couldn't know. He couldn't possibly know. But there was something about the way he spoke, not as if he guessed, but as if he remembered her. And then, before she could find words, the sound of distant footsteps sliced through the air. The soldiers. Their voices rising over the wind, barking orders, calling her name. Cale tilted his head again. That faint metallic rattle from his wrists caught the lightning's glow, and something primal shifted beneath his calm. Without warning, he stepped between her and the sound. Wait, she began, but he was already moving. The rain seemed to pause for half a heartbeat, as though holding its breath. Then Cale's muscles rippled beneath his soaked cloak, and in that moment, Lyra saw the faintest shimmer beneath his skin, the shadow of the beast. His claws began to form, not fully, just enough to pierce through the fragile boundary between man and wolf. His teeth flashed in the lightning, and his voice, that steady, broken voice, dropped into something darker. Stay behind me. The soldiers appeared like ghosts through the storm, their torches struggling against the wind. Lyra counted 6, maybe 7. Trained killers, their armor marked with the royal crest, the same crest that sentenced her to death. "Target ahead," one shouted. "The witch and her companion, take them both." Before Lyra could move, Cale growled. It wasn't human. It wasn't even sound. It was vibration, deep, ancient, something that lived beneath the earth itself. The torches flickered. The air thickened. The soldiers hesitated for just a breath, and that was all he needed. He struck like thunder. Blind, yet every motion precise. He moved through the chaos with an instinct that bordered on divine. His claws caught one soldier's throat, tearing through metal and flesh in a single motion. He turned with the momentum, caught another by the arm, and sent him crashing into the marble. Rain washed the blood away before it could even stain the stone. Lyra wanted to look away, she couldn't. There was beauty in it. Brutality woven with grace. He was bleeding, yes, but every strike was fueled by something raw and protective. Not rage. Not vengeance. Something older. She felt it. He was fighting for her. And she didn't even know why. The scent of blood filled the air. The soldiers fell one by one, until silence reclaimed the ruins. Cale's breath came rough now, his body trembling slightly as he forced himself upright. His claws receded, his shoulders shuddered, and for the first time, Lyra saw the cost. The curse that came with his strength. He turned slightly, head still bowed, rain dripping from his hair. "You'll die for helping me," she whispered, voice trembling as she stepped closer. He gave a faint, bitter smile. "I already did." Those words hit something deep in her chest. Something she didn't have words for. For a moment, the storm felt distant. The only sound was their breath. Lyra's dagger lowered. Her eyes moved over his face, the faint scars tracing his jaw, the milky white of his eyes, the quiet pain behind his stillness. He wasn't just blind. He was carrying something much heavier. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off him. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. He tilted his head slightly, the faintest smirk ghosting across his lips. "And yet, I did." There was no arrogance in his tone. Just truth. Simple, unshakable truth. The silence between them stretched, filled with the scent of rain and blood and something else, electricity. Not the kind born of storms, but of hearts that had been broken in similar ways. Lyra finally tore her gaze away and glanced at the bodies around them. The soldiers were gone, but their presence lingered like a curse. "They'll send more," she murmured. "They always do." Cale straightened, the chains around his wrists glinting faintly. "Then you should move." "I can't leave you here. You don't even know me." She hesitated. "Then tell me who you are." For a long moment, he said nothing. The rain softened into a mist. The storm began to pull away, leaving behind the smell of wet stone and burnt torches. Then, quietly, almost too low for her to hear, he said, "I was the Alpha of the North." The name carried weight. She felt it before she even processed it. The Alpha of the North. The ghost of a leader who disappeared after the rebellion. Some said he'd been executed. Others whispered he'd gone feral and wandered into the mountains to die. Cale. And now he was standing here, blind, chained, bleeding, saving a woman he'd never met. Lyra's mind spun. "But the story said you were dead," he interrupted. His head turned toward her, and even though his eyes couldn't see, it felt as if he was staring straight through her. "Maybe I am." Something inside her shifted at those words. A quiet ache. The kind that recognizes its twin. He turned away, taking a shaky step forward, his boots sliding slightly on the slick marble. Without thinking, she reached out and caught his arm. The moment her skin touched his, she felt it, heat. Not just warmth, but something living. Pulsing. It moved through her like a heartbeat that wasn't her own. He froze. So did she. Her fingers trembled where they rested against him. "You're hurt," she said, but her voice was softer now, no longer guarded. "I've been hurt before." "That's not the point." His lips curved slightly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You talk like a healer." She hesitated. "I was one." "Was?" She nodded slowly. "Before they burned my clinic. Before they called me a traitor." The words slipped out before she could stop them. And in that moment, something in him changed. His head tilted again, and for the first time, his voice gentled. "They feared what they didn't understand." Lyra swallowed, blinking away the sting of tears she hadn't meant to let fall. "And what about you? What are you?" He turned his face toward the dark horizon. "A reminder," he said quietly. "That even alphas can be broken." The wind picked up again, swirling between them, carrying the scent of smoke from the nearby village, the one she'd escaped from. Somewhere out there, more soldiers would be tracking her. And yet, she couldn't move. She couldn't leave him. He started walking again, slow, careful steps, like someone who could hear the world breathing around him. She followed, her gaze never leaving the jagged scars down his back, half hidden by the torn cloak. He didn't ask for her help. But when his knees nearly buckled, she caught him again. This time, he didn't pull away. The sound of the storm faded completely, leaving only the steady rhythm of their breathing. She guided him to the shadows of an old stone archway, remnants of what once was a temple. He leaned against the wall, chest heaving, his hair plastered to his skin. Lyra knelt beside him, pulling her satchel close. She tore a strip from her cloak, pressed it gently to the wound at his side. He winced, barely, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "You should run while you can. They won't stop hunting you." "Neither will they stop hunting you," she said. He smiled faintly. "I'm used to being hunted." Her hands trembled as she worked. The blood soaked through the fabric, warm against her fingers. "You're not healing fast enough," she murmured. "The curse slowed it," he said simply. She looked up. "Curse?" He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Blindness was the price for mercy." Lyra paused, breath catching in her throat. "Mercy?" He turned his head toward her again. "I spared the wrong life," he said. "And the gods took my sight for it." The honesty in his tone stripped her of words. There was no bitterness, no pride, just acceptance. She sat there, staring at him, realizing how wrong the stories had been. They called him a monster. But the man before her was something else entirely. A storm made flesh. A ruin wrapped in grace. And she couldn't look away. He tilted his face toward her, sensing her silence. "You're still here," he murmured. She met his sightless eyes. "Maybe I'm cursed too." For the first time, his lips parted in a quiet laugh, rough, genuine, almost human. The sound of it filled the ruins, soft and fleeting, before fading into the night. And as the last echo of thunder rolled away, Lyra realized something that would haunt her long after this storm. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of what she was starting to feel. The bond she could sense forming in the space between their heartbeats, wild, forbidden, undeniable. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. They reached the shrine long after midnight. The rain had gentled into mist by then, a soft veil that clung to the world and made everything feel smaller, quieter, more fragile. The shrine stood half buried in ivy, the stone walls cracked but still holding the memory of prayers long forgotten. A single wolf carved in marble crouched above the entrance, its eyes hollow and its snout worn smooth by time. Lyra pushed open the door, its hinges sighing in protest, and guided Kale inside. The air was cold, thick with damp moss and old incense. Broken candles lay scattered across the floor, their wax hardened into rivers of pale yellow. She could almost hear the echoes of what this place used to be, chants, offerings, the soft hum of faith before the world turned cruel. "Sit," she whispered. Kale obeyed without question, lowering himself onto a stone step near the altar. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though he was memorizing every sound around him. His head turned slightly toward the faint crackle of thunder outside. Lyra knelt, struck a spark from the small flint she carried, and coaxed a fire to life. The orange glow spilled over the walls, chasing away the shadows. When it reached his face, she noticed how pale he'd become. His lips were colorless, his breathing shallow. "You shouldn't have fought," she murmured, reaching for her satchel. "I wasn't about to let them take you." His voice was steady, but she heard the strain beneath it. She pulled out a pouch of dried herbs and began grinding them in a small bowl. The rhythmic motion of the pestle against stone steadied her trembling hands. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the whisper of the fire and the faint drip of rain leaking through the roof. Then Cale spoke again, quieter this time. "You're used to tending wounds." "I was a healer," she said. The pestle stilled in her hand. She looked up, meeting his blind gaze. "Before everything burned." His head tilted slightly. "What burned?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed the salve against the gash in his side. He tensed, breath hitching, but didn't pull away. The scent of crushed rosemary and sage filled the air. "Finally," she said, "my life." Her voice broke on the last word. Cale didn't speak. He waited, silent, patient, as if he could feel the story unspooling inside her before she even gave it shape. "I was born under a full moon," she said softly. "The pack said it was a blessing. My father was Beta then, proud, loyal, the kind of man who never bent his knee even to an alpha. He wanted me strong. Wanted me pure." Her hands trembled as she tied the bandage. "But the first time I healed someone, the flame came." "Flame?" She looked up, eyes reflecting the firelight. "Silver fire. It burned through me. It healed the wounds, but it destroyed everything else around it. The grass, the altar, the very air. They said it was a curse, the moon goddess's punishment for tampering with life itself." Cale's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across his face. "My father called me a monster," she whispered. "Said I brought shame to our bloodline. He tried to cleanse me with salt and prayer. When that didn't work, he banished me." Her breath trembled. "I remember the smell of smoke as they burned the altar. I remember my mother's silence. And I remember running barefoot into the woods with nothing but this satchel." Cale's fingers twitched where they rested on his knee, as if reaching for her though he didn't move. "I wandered for years," she continued. "Among humans. They didn't know what I was, but they sensed something. Some would come to me for healing, others would cross themselves and throw stones. I stayed alive by helping them, even when they spat at me. Because it was the only way I could still believe I wasn't what my father said I was." Her words cracked on that last line. She turned her face away, blinking hard. For a long while, there was silence. Then Cale spoke, his voice low and rough, almost hesitant. "They feared what they couldn't name." She looked back at him. "So did you?" "I don't fear what burns," he said. "I fear what refuses to die." Their eyes, his blind, hers glistening, met in the firelight. Lyra reached out before she could stop herself. Her fingers brushed his wrist, tracing the rough iron chain still fastened there. It was old, corroded, fused to his skin in places. She could feel the faint heat of the metal, like it still remembered his captivity. "Who did this to you?" she asked. He hesitated. His throat worked before he spoke. "My own." Her breath caught. "I led them into war," Cale said, voice distant. "The rebellion wasn't just against a king. It was against what we were becoming, beasts ruled by bloodlust, forgetting what it meant to be human. I wanted peace. They wanted vengeance." The firelight flickered over his face, deepening the hollows of his cheekbones. "When I refused to slaughter the last of the royal pack, they called me weak. A traitor. I spared one life that night, the prince's child. And for that, the moon blinded me." Lyra stared at him, heart twisting. "You lost everything because of mercy." He gave a faint, humorless smile. Seems you and I share that flaw. She laughed softly, not from joy, but from the strange comfort of recognition. The storm outside faded to a hush. Only the fire crackled between them, small but steady, a fragile heartbeat in the silence. She adjusted the bandage one last time, then leaned back on her heels. You should rest. I can't. Because you don't trust me? Because every time I close my eyes, he said quietly, I see the ones I couldn't save. Her chest ached at the honesty in his voice. She moved closer, just enough that the warmth of his body brushed hers. You did what you could. He shook his head. That's what they all say. Until the ghosts start whispering. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire popped softly, casting shadows that danced along the walls like restless spirits. Lyra's eyes softened as she studied him, the jagged scars, the exhaustion in his posture, the way his fingers twitched when he thought she wasn't looking. She realized then how much strength it took for him just to sit there, breathing, existing. She reached out again, this time without hesitation, and rested her hand on his. His skin was rough, scarred, but beneath that, warmth. Life. He didn't pull away. Why are you helping me? He asked, voice low, uncertain. She hesitated. Because, her throat tightened. Because you didn't flinch when I touched you. For the first time, he smiled, a real smile. Soft, small, but real. You hide light in your pain, Lyra, he murmured. She looked away, embarrassed by how easily his words disarmed her. Don't mistake pain for light. I don't, he said. But sometimes the two are born together. The way he said it, so sure, so quiet, made something inside her chest shift. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that pain only left scars, that light was for people who hadn't lost everything. But she couldn't. Not when his presence felt like proof that broken things could still burn bright. The firelight caught the faint silver shimmer that sometimes flickered in her eyes, that cursed glow she hated so much. Cale's head tilted slightly. You're doing it again, he said softly. Doing what? Fighting yourself. She froze. He couldn't see her expression, but somehow he knew. I can hear it, he continued. The way your breath catches. The way your heart speeds up when you think about running. You're not meant to run anymore, Lyra. His voice wasn't a command. It was a promise. Her throat tightened. Then what am I meant to do? He turned toward her, the firelight reflected faintly in the clouded white of his eyes. Stay. Heal. Burn if you must, but don't hide from your own flame. The words sank deep, deeper than she wanted to admit. Outside, the wind carried the distant sound of a wolf's howl, long, mournful, echoing through the hills. Lyra's fingers tightened around his hand. She didn't know if the sound belonged to friend or foe. She didn't care. In that moment, all that mattered was the fragile warmth between them, two outcasts finding solace in a ruin that shouldn't have still been standing. Cale exhaled slowly, his head resting back against the stone. The exhaustion in his body was palpable now, but so was something else, calm. Trust. Lyra shifted closer, pulled the torn edges of his cloak over him, and sat beside him. For the first time in years, she didn't feel hunted. Just human. She stared into the fire until her eyes blurred. Her thoughts wandered, not to her past, but to what tomorrow might look like if she stopped running. And somewhere in that fragile silence, as sleep finally began to steal her away, Cale whispered the words she didn't hear fully, but that would echo in her dreams. You weren't cursed, Lyra. You were chosen. The flames danced higher, painting their faces in soft gold. Outside, the last of the storm passed over the mountains. And in the ruined shrine, beneath the gaze of the forgotten marble wolf, two broken souls began to heal, one breath, one heartbeat, one shared warmth at a time. The ruins changed with every sunrise. What once felt like a graveyard of forgotten gods now breathed with quiet life. Lyra gathered herbs from the wild edges of the market, dried them by the hearth, and used them to treat Cale's wounds. She spoke little, but he listened to the sound of her movements, the steady rhythm of her footsteps, the rustle of fabric, the muted clatter of stone bowls. Sometimes, she caught him turning his face toward the light that filtered through the cracks in the shrine's roof, as if he could see the warmth instead of the world. His blindness was not emptiness. It was listening. Feeling. Waiting. Days melted into nights. The scent of healing smoke and crushed rosemary lingered in the air. Cale's strength returned slowly, though his silence deepened with it. Lyra could feel the weight in him, the kind of stillness that wasn't peace but control. Every breath he took felt like a decision not to break. She understood that kind of silence too well. On the 7th night, the moon rose red. Thick clouds rolled apart like torn curtains, revealing a sky that pulsed with color. The light fell across the ancient altar, coating the cracked runes in scarlet. Cale's head turned toward it. "It's different tonight," he murmured. Lyra followed his gaze. "The moon?" He nodded faintly. "It smells like iron. Like old blood." Her heart quickened. The air felt charged, humming just below her skin. She moved closer to the altar. The marble surface was cold beneath her fingertips. The carvings, faint grooves spiraling in a language older than any she'd seen, seemed to breathe beneath her touch. "What does it look like?" Cale asked quietly. Lyra hesitated. "There are symbols, wolves, flames, a circle of eyes. Words I can't read. The stone looks alive. Read what you can." She leaned closer, tracing the faint letters. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "When the blind Alpha," the next words glowed faintly under her touch. "Sees again, the world will burn." She stopped, pulse racing. The runes flared brighter, the light deepening to gold. Cale straightened, his posture sharp. "Go on." Lyra's hand shook as she continued. "And be reborn through the flame of mercy." The moment she finished, the ground trembled. The fire behind them guttered out, though no wind touched it. The air thickened, humming with something alive, ancient, watching. Lyra stumbled back from the altar, her breath coming fast. "That's impossible." Cale rose slowly, one hand braced against the wall. "The flame of mercy," he said under his breath. Then, turning toward her, his voice softened. "That's you." She shook her head. "No. No, I don't." But the light from the altar spilled across the floor, curling toward her like molten rivers. Her skin prickled. Every heartbeat pounded louder until she could feel the rhythm in her throat. The warmth coiled up her arms, beneath her veins, searing but not painful. Memories, no, visions, struck her like thunder. Wolves kneeling before her in a burning forest. Cale standing at the center of a battlefield, eyes blazing gold. The moon weeping light across ruins that pulsed like a living heart. She gasped and fell to her knees, clutching her temples. "Stop," she whispered. "Please stop." Cale moved toward her instinctively, reaching through the darkness. "What do you see?" "Everything," she choked. "Fire, blood, ash, and you. Your eyes, they're gold." He knelt beside her, his hands hovering just short of touching her face. "Breathe." She tried. The vision softened, fading into flickers, leaving behind a raw ache deep in her chest. When she opened her eyes again, the runes were still glowing. The altar pulsed faintly, as if waiting for something more. Her voice broke the silence. "How can I be salvation when I was born from destruction?" Cale's fingers brushed her hand, light, hesitant. "Because even fire heals when it burns the right way." Something inside her shifted. The words lodged themselves deep, like an arrow that didn't wound but anchored. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw that he wasn't afraid. He should have been. Every story she'd heard about the flame spoke of ruin. Every whisper ended in death. But Cale, blind and broken as he was, faced her as though he'd already made peace with whatever she was. The runes dimmed slowly, their light ebbing into faint embers. The air still trembled with power, but it was gentler now, curious instead of angry. Cale reached for the altar, fingertips grazing the surface. "These stones remember," he said softly. "They were here before kings. Before pacts. Before the wars." Lyra followed his gaze. "You sound like you've been here before." He nodded slightly. "Not here. But somewhere like it. My mother told me stories of the shrines built to honor the goddess of balance, the one who gave wolves their first shift. They said her power lived in those born between mercy and rage." She frowned. "And you think that's me?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." The conviction in his tone made her chest tighten. "You don't even know what I am." His lips twitched faintly. "You forget, I can feel what others can't see. The air bends around you, Lyra. It bends like it used to around the old alphas, before we forgot what power was meant to serve." Her breath trembled. "Power doesn't serve. It destroys. Only when it belongs to the wrong hands." She turned away, pacing. "You talk like fate is simple. Like prophecy is just a riddle we can solve with faith." Cale's head tilted slightly. "You don't believe in fate?" "I used to. Until it tore everything from me." Her voice cracked, the confession tumbling out before she could stop it. "My father prayed to fate while he cast me out. My pack swore they were following the goddess's will when they burned my home. If that's fate, then I want no part of it." Cale stood slowly, his shadow long against the altar's glow. "Maybe fate isn't something that happens to us. Maybe it's something that waits until we choose." Lyra stared at him, caught between anger and awe. "You make it sound like I have a choice." "You always did." The quiet between them thickened, filled with the steady hum of unseen power. The altar's light flickered once, then went still. Lyra sank to the floor, exhausted. "Why me?" she whispered. Cale knelt beside her again, his hand finding hers. His skin was warm, his pulse steady. "Because you carry both mercy and flame," he said. "That's what the world needs. Not another weapon. Not another savior. Someone who remembers that mercy isn't weakness." She looked down at their joined hands, the silver glow faintly returning to her fingertips. "And if I can't control it? Then I'll burn beside you," he said simply. The words hit harder than any vow she'd ever heard. They weren't romantic, they were truth. She wanted to tell him not to say things like that. That she didn't want another person dying for her mistakes. But before she could, a low hum filled the air. The altar's carvings shifted, stone grinding against stone, and a new symbol appeared, one she hadn't seen before. A wolf's head encircled by a burning halo. Cale's hand tightened around hers. The mark of the goddess. Light seeped from the carving, curling through the cracks in the walls, racing up the pillars. Outside, wolves howled, dozens of them, their cries answering the pulse of the altar. The ruins trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lyra clutched Cale's arm. "What's happening?" "The prophecy is awakening," he said. "The world remembers." The air shimmered with heat. Every breath felt heavier, charged with power too vast to name. Lyra's heart raced as she felt something stir beneath her skin, a pulse that wasn't hers. Images flashed in her mind again. Wolves bound in chains, cities burning, the moon bleeding silver. And through it all, a voice echoed, not loud, not soft, but absolute. "The flame will heal what pride has ruined." Lyra gasped, the words tearing through her chest. "Cale, I heard her. The goddess." She spoke. His grip tightened. "What did she say?" "That I'm supposed to heal what's been ruined." Her voice shook. "But how do you heal a world that's already turned to ash?" Cale's lips curved in a faint, pained smile. "You start with one heart that still beats." The ground steadied. The altar's glow softened, retreating back into the carvings until only faint warmth remained. Lyra's pulse slowly calmed. She looked at Cale, still holding her hand as though it anchored him to the world. What if this prophecy destroys us? He lifted his face toward the heat of the dying magic. Then at least we'll know we didn't run from what we were born to do. Outside, the blood-red moon slipped behind clouds. The light faded from the ruins, leaving only the quiet hum of distant thunder. Lyra exhaled, the weight of the prophecy pressing down on her like a second heartbeat. For the first time since she'd met him, she was afraid, not of him, not of her power, but of what lay ahead. She turned to Cale. If the world burns because of me. He shook his head. It won't burn because of you. It will burn through you. And in that fragile stillness, beneath the forgotten shrine and the gaze of broken statues, the myth that had slept for centuries began to wake, slowly, silently, inevitably, through the bond neither of them could deny. The night bled open with the sound of boots and claws. The ruins that had sheltered them for days now groaned under the weight of approaching footsteps. Wolves, Cale's wolves, closing in. The scent of them hit first, iron, smoke, and pack loyalty twisted with rage. Cale rose from where he sat beside the dying embers, his head tilting slightly, nostrils flaring. The faintest crease marked his brow. He didn't need sight to recognize that rhythm, the steady formation, the disciplined silence before violence. His pack had found him. Lyra froze where she stood, her pulse drumming against the still air. The moon hung heavy and red above the ruins, watching like a god that had already chosen sides. Her hand hovered over the edge of the altar, still faintly warm from the prophecy's awakening. The words carved into the stone pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. Then came the first growl. Low. Drawn out. Hungry. Figures emerged from the shadows, half men, half beasts. Their eyes glowed gold under the moonlight, their movements sharp and sure. At their center stood Varys. Lord Varys. Cale's beta. His second. His shadow. He wore his authority like a weapon, polished, deliberate, deadly. His armor was dark leather etched with sigils of the northern clans, a testament to wars fought and won long before this night. His voice carried easily through the ruins. Alpha. The word sounded more accusation than respect. Cale's jaw tightened. Varys. Varys's gaze cut past him, landing on Lyra. The sneer that curved his lips carried the chill of old hatred. She's the reason you're blind, Cale. Her kind burned our kin. Lyra's chest constricted. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Cale's fists clenched at his sides. I don't remember that, he said quietly. That's because she made you forget. Varys stepped closer, voice a growl now. The witch cursed you. You've been rotting out here under her spell while our pack tears itself apart without its alpha. The words hit like stone. Cale's mind pulsed with fragments, flashes of fire, screams, the sting of smoke in his lungs. A woman's voice calling his name. Then darkness. He staggered back a step. The weight of his forgotten past pressed against the fragile calm he'd built with Lyra. Lyra swallowed hard, voice trembling. He doesn't know what he's saying. Varys' eyes snapped toward her. Do not speak. The wolves flanking him growled in unison, a sound that rattled the air itself. Cale raised a hand, his voice low but edged. Enough. Varys didn't move. You would defend her? I would hear the truth. The truth? Varys laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth is you've forgotten who you are. You're our alpha. You were betrayed, cursed, and cast into shadow because of her. He pointed at Lyra, eyes blazing. You want proof? Look at what she is. Look at her hands. Lyra flinched. Her palms still bore faint traces of silver light, the echo of the prophecy's awakening. It shimmered softly under the moon's glow, beautiful, dangerous, undeniable. Cale felt the energy humming in the air, the pulse of her presence. His heartbeat quickened. He didn't know what to believe, his past, or the peace she had given him. Cale, Lyra whispered, stepping closer. You have to listen to me. But before she could reach him, Varys drew his blade, a curved weapon engraved with pack runes that caught the red light like blood. "You've done enough," he hissed. Cale heard the shift before he smelled it, the surge of muscles, the scrape of bone. The wolves behind Varys changed shape in a storm of growls and cracking bones. The ruins exploded with motion. Wolves lunged. Steel flashed. Cale moved instinctively, catching Varys' arm before the blade struck Lyra. Their strength collided with a sharp clang that echoed through the shrine. Cale twisted, forcing Varys back, but the beta was relentless, his fury sharpened by betrayal. "Wake up!" Varys snarled. "She's poisoned you." Cale's voice was a snarl. "I decide who I am." A wolf leaped toward Lyra. She barely had time to turn before its claws raked across her shoulder, sending her sprawling against the altar. The impact tore through her bones. She gasped as pain flared hot and bright. Something inside her broke open. The air cracked with heat. Her hands flared with silver fire, wild and alive, spiraling up her arms. She screamed as it surged outward, uncontrolled, unfiltered, the prophecy itself awakening through her veins. Flames erupted from her palms, not orange or red, but blinding silver, pure and terrible. The wolves recoiled, howling as the light seared through the air. The heat wasn't just fire, it was memory, power, mercy twisted into wrath. Cale turned toward her, his breath catching. "Lyra." But she couldn't hear him. The world dissolved into flame. The ancient runes on the altar blazed alive, responding to her fury. The ground trembled beneath them as the ruins came to life, centuries of silence burning away. Varys shielded his eyes, his snarl breaking into something close to fear. "She's the curse made flesh." Cale fell to his knees, his mind tearing between loyalty and the truth that pulsed in his chest. He could feel her pain through the air itself, every heartbeat, every ounce of despair wrapped in that light. He reached out blindly, voice breaking. "Tell me, Lyra. Did you curse me?" The flames faltered for a moment. Her voice came through the roar, trembling, raw. "No, Cale. I saved you." The confession cut through the chaos. But it came too late. Varys raised his hand. "Kill her." The pack obeyed. Wolves lunged again, blades gleamed, and the world collapsed into violence. Lyra screamed as the fire burst free once more, stronger this time, divine and uncontrollable. The ruin shuddered under its force. Statues cracked. Pillars split. The air itself ignited. The wolves were thrown back by a shockwave of light. Cale's cry vanished in the roar. He reached for her, his fingers grazing air before the explosion consumed everything. Then, silence. When the smoke cleared, the ancient market was unrecognizable. The stones were scorched, the altar fractured into two jagged halves. The wolves lay scattered, dazed but alive. Varys pushed himself up, coughing, eyes wide in disbelief. Cale was on his knees at the center of the ruin, ash clinging to his skin. The air still shimmered faintly with silver fire. But Lyra was gone. He called her name once. Then again. Louder. His voice cracked on the third try. The only answer was the low moan of the wind moving through broken stone. Varys rose slowly, blood on his lip. "She's gone, Alpha. The witch is dead." Cale didn't move. His hand brushed the ground, still warm. He could feel it, faint and fading, the trace of her heartbeat in the air. Not gone. Not yet. "She's not dead," he said quietly. Varys' mouth twisted. "You saw what she did. That wasn't mercy. That was a monster's fire." Cale turned his face toward him. His blind eyes burned with something beyond sight, fury, grief, and a strange, aching clarity. "You speak of monsters as though we haven't been them for generations." Varys stiffened. "You're defending her?" "I'm remembering," Cale said. He rose, slow and deliberate, the weight of his choice settling into the air. "She didn't curse me. She saved me from whatever I was becoming before this. Varys took a step back, confusion warring with anger. You've lost your mind. Maybe, Cale said softly. But I found my soul. The words hung heavy between them, sinking into the scorched earth. The wolves behind Varys shifted uneasily, their growls uncertain now. The power in Cale's voice wasn't rage, it was command. He turned away from them, toward the broken altar. His hands traced the cracked surface, the faint warmth that lingered where Lyra had fallen. I will find her, he murmured. Varys's voice hardened. And if she's truly what the prophecy says she is? Cale's jaw clenched. Then the world will burn, but not without me beside her. The beta stared at him, searching his face for the alpha he once knew. What he saw there made him step back, shaken. Cale stood tall now, unseeing eyes fixed on the horizon, the faintest glimmer of light flickering behind them, the first spark of sight breaking through darkness. The prophecy was moving. The wolves felt it too, an ancient pull threading through the ruins, a warning carried on the wind. The world had begun to fight back. As dawn bled over the ruins, Cale walked alone toward the forest's edge, leaving his pack behind. The blind alpha could see nothing, yet he saw more than ever. And somewhere far beyond the burning fields, in the heart of the old world, Lyra opened her eyes. The goddess's fire still lived inside her. The forest had changed since the night of fire. What was once ash and ruin now whispered with cautious life again, moss reclaiming stone, water running cold through fractured marble, roots curling through bones of forgotten gods. But the quiet didn't last. Beneath it, something restless moved, something watching. Weeks had passed since the explosion at the ruins, yet Cale could still feel the echo of her heartbeat in his veins. It was faint, but it pulsed like a tether, one that neither blindness nor distance could sever. He followed that rhythm across forgotten lands. Through mountains that breathed frost and forests that remembered blood. Through nights where he dreamt her voice calling his name like wind across broken temples. Each step was guided not by sight, but by the bond that had taken root the night her flames touched his skin. A strange awareness lived inside him now, hers. Sometimes, he would stop by the edge of rivers, head tilted toward the flow, whispering, "Where are you?" And the world would answer only with silence. But he kept walking. Until one dusk, the bond shifted. It tightened suddenly, sharply, like the moon itself had tugged on an invisible thread inside his chest. His breath hitched. She was close. Cale moved without hesitation, weaving through the dense forest, the scent of water and healing herbs growing stronger. The sound of rushing current led him to a cave carved beside a narrow river, hidden beneath curtains of ivy. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and wolf fur. And there she was. Lyra knelt by the fire, her hair damp from river water, her hands carefully binding the leg of a small wolf pup. The creature whimpered softly, its paw torn, its trust fragile. She hummed under her breath, the melody trembling like a prayer. Cale stood silently at the mouth of the cave, his blind eyes pale in the moonlight filtering through the leaves. He didn't need to see her to know, he could feel every tremor of her heart. She froze, mid-motion. Her shoulders stiffened, breath catching as though she'd known this moment would come. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, still facing the fire. Cale's voice was quiet, steady. "And yet," he said, taking a single step forward, "you knew I would." The pup stirred, sensing the shift in the air. Lyra finished wrapping its paw, setting it gently beside her. The creature limped to a corner of the cave, curling into a small ball of silver fur. Lyra turned slowly, eyes meeting his, though his could not return the gaze. Her lips parted, the apology unspoken but heavy in the air between them. "I hurt you," she said softly. "I hurt everyone." Cale tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "You saved me." Her voice cracked. "And nearly destroyed the world doing it." He took another step closer, the faintest echo of his boots against stone. "You gave me back something the world had already taken, Lyra." She frowned, searching his face. "You're blind, Cale. What could I possibly have given you?" He smiled faintly, the kind that came from a place deeper than sight. Hope. For a long while, neither spoke. The fire hissed and crackled, painting the walls in gold and shadow. Outside, the river murmured like distant memory. Finally, Lyra motioned for him to sit. He found his way beside the fire, lowering himself carefully to the ground. Their silence became its own language, unhurried, raw, human. When Cale spoke again, his tone had changed. Softer. Honest. I never told you how I lost my sight. Lyra's fingers stilled. You don't have to. I want to. He drew in a breath, the air trembling slightly around him. It wasn't a curse. Not at first. My own pack, they betrayed me. Sold me to Roman hunters to save themselves. The chains they used, silver mixed with salt. I was burned blind, left for dead on the auction stones. Lyra's throat tightened. The image cut through her, Cale chained, sightless, the proud alpha reduced to prey. She wanted to reach for him, but her hands trembled. When I woke, he continued, the world was gone. All I could hear were voices, men bidding, laughing. And then, silence. Until I heard yours. Lyra blinked. Mine? The night you found me, he said. I didn't know where I was, but I knew your heartbeat. I could feel it through the rain. It sounded like the world starting over. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. You think too kindly of me. I think truthfully of you. She turned away, staring into the fire. You don't know what I've done, Cale. I carry things that burn through anyone who gets too close. He leaned forward slightly. Then let me burn. Her head snapped toward him, shock flashing across her face. Cale's tone softened, but the steel beneath it held. You run from the world because it called you cursed. You run from me because you think I'll believe them. But I know what it is to be marked by pain. I know what it costs to keep breathing when the world tells you not to. Lyra's lips trembled. And what if I lose control again? What if I hurt you? Then I'll heal slower, he said simply. The simplicity of it broke something inside her. The firelight flickered, bathing his face in warm gold. His eyes, blind though they were, seemed to hold a strange glow, as though they reflected something unseen. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since the prophecy, she didn't see the cursed alpha or the lost leader. She saw a man trying to find peace inside his ruin. He reached out then, fingers brushing against her wrist, slow and careful. She didn't pull away. The touch was feather-light but sure, grounding her in a way nothing else could. Lyra, his voice lowered, barely a breath. Trust me, or leave me. Her breath hitched. The words sank into her like roots. I can't, she whispered. Yes, you can. You don't understand. If the prophecy is true, if my power keeps growing, I'll destroy everything. He shook his head slightly. You think destruction and destiny are the same thing. They're not. Tears welled in her eyes. You'd risk everything for someone like me? Cale smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth curving with quiet defiance. You're not someone like you. You're the reason I can still feel the moon. Silence. Thick. Sacred. The kind that made the air too fragile to disturb. The fire crackled softly, casting their shadows on the cave walls. Lyra's hand trembled in his, caught between wanting to stay and fearing she shouldn't. Cale's thumb traced the edge of her palm, steady and warm. For a moment, they simply breathed together. The sound of it, the shared rhythm, was more intimate than any word could be. Their faces were close now. So close that her breath brushed his cheek, and he could smell the faint trace of herbs and rain on her skin. The tension between them wasn't the kind that begged to be broken, it was the kind that held its breath, afraid to move too quickly and ruin something sacred. Lyra's eyes searched his blind ones, wondering if he could feel the storm inside her chest. Cale leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. If you want to run, I won't stop you. But if you stay, Her pulse stuttered. If I stay? Then you'll never be alone in the dark again. Her lips parted. The space between them vanished slowly, naturally, like gravity itself had decided for them. The warmth of his breath mingled with hers, the air thick with everything they hadn't said. Their foreheads touched first, gentle, hesitant. She closed her eyes. His fingers trailed up to her jaw, tracing the curve as though memorizing it by feel. Her body leaned into his without thought, every instinct screaming yes. But then, a low howl cut through the night outside. Sharp. Urgent. The fire flickered violently, throwing their faces into shadow. Lyra pulled back instantly, heart hammering. They've found us. Cale's expression hardened, senses sharpening. He could feel the vibration in the air, the distant thud of paws, the faint metallic tang of armed men. He turned his head toward the cave entrance, listening. Not Varys, he murmured. Something else. The wind shifted. Cold. Warning. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly silver in the dark, the light pulsing like a heartbeat. Cale, she said quietly, it's starting. He rose to his feet, the firelight catching the edge of his jaw, the scars on his wrists. Then let it come. Outside, the forest held back. The prophecy was no longer a story whispered by old gods. It was alive. And it had chosen them both. The fire had barely faded when Cale fell to his knees. The ruins of the amphitheater groaned beneath the weight of ash and prophecy, their ancient stones split by the violence of divine truth. Smoke curled through the night like morning veils, and every breath he drew was heavy with the scent of her, Lyra's warmth, her flame, her sacrifice. The wolves that had once obeyed his command stood frozen in silence, their eyes lowered, not in reverence but in fear. Cale's hands trembled as he reached toward the place where she had stood, where light had devoured shadow. The stone was still hot, whispering with the residue of her power. He could almost feel her pulse there, faint, fading, yet impossibly alive in the way the world itself still trembled around him. She's gone, Varys said, voice sharp and hollow. His sword dripped blood, the steel glinting crimson in the fractured moonlight. The witch paid for her sin. You owe the goddess no more. Cale turned his head slightly, his golden eyes flaring. The pack flinched. For the first time since the curse, he could see everything, every particle of ash, every drop of rain sliding down Varys' blade, every heartbeat quivering in the wolves around him. It was as though the world had been blind all along, not him. Sin? Cale whispered. You call mercy sin? Varys stepped forward, anger masking uncertainty. She deceived you. She twisted the prophecy to bind your power. Look around, Cale, your sight returns only after her death. Cale rose slowly. The golden light in his gaze deepened, burning not with rage but with revelation. No. My sight returns because she broke what bound me. She took the pain meant for me. His voice carried the weight of command, but beneath it lay grief, the kind that hollowed a man from within. The wind stirred, carrying the distant hum of something ancient. Cale looked toward the horizon where clouds turned like a wounded sky. He felt her presence still, faint, buried deep within the pulse of the world. She's not gone, he said. The flame doesn't die. It transforms. Varys growled. Enough of your madness. You've been touched by her corruption. The council will hear of this. Cale turned toward him, eyes narrowing. The council is dust. The empire that chained us is ash. And you will never speak her name again with your lies. The beta hesitated. The pack shifted uneasily, their loyalty splitting between fear and reverence. Cale stepped closer, his aura radiating heat that smelled faintly of silver flame. Varys stumbled backward, eyes wide. You forget, Cale said, his tone low, controlled. The moon made me alpha. But it was fire that made me see. He turned from them, walking into the night without another word. The forest opened before him, vast, whispering, endless. Every shadow carried her name. He wandered for days. The wound in his shoulder had healed, but the hollow in his chest would not. The farther he walked, the louder the world seemed to echo her memory, the rhythm of the river that once bathed her hair, the crackle of fire that once warmed their silence, the scent of crushed herbs she used to treat his scars. By the fifth night, he reached the Valley of Bones, a desolate place where ancient packs once fought under the gaze of the moon. The ruins of their wars still littered the earth, skulls bleached white, forgotten oaths carved into stone. Cale fell to his knees. "Lyra," he whispered. "You said fire heals when it burns the right way. Then tell me, how do I heal when the flame I needed is gone?" The wind stirred. And somewhere deep within the valley, a spark answered. It began as a pulse, faint, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The ground trembled. The air shimmered. From the ashes near the altar rose a flicker of silver light, twisting, reshaping. Cale's breath caught. Her voice came first. Not from the air, but from within him, a whisper buried in his blood. "You are not meant to mourn me, Cale. You are meant to rise." His fingers dug into the dirt. "Lyra. The world isn't done with us." The light took form, a phantom outline, delicate and fierce, her hair glimmering like molten moonlight. She was not whole, not flesh, but essence, the fire's echo. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the ache inside him softened. "You're alive." Her smile was faint. "Alive enough to haunt the one who swore he'd die for me." He stepped closer, his hand reaching but never touching. "You shouldn't have taken that blow. And you shouldn't have doubted me," she said gently. "But we did both, didn't we?" He closed his eyes, the guilt pressing hard. "I failed you." Her hand, or what felt like one, brushed his face, weightless yet searing. "You can only fail me if you stop fighting. The prophecy wasn't about your sight, Cale. It was about what you'd do once you saw." "What am I supposed to see now?" Her gaze turned toward the horizon, where a faint crimson shimmer painted the sky. "The shadow isn't gone. Varys wasn't alone. The Roman bloodlines that cursed us still breathe, in the mountains beyond the Empire. They seek the flame of mercy. They'll twist it for war if we don't stop them." He studied her, awe and dread warring in his chest. "Then come back. Fight with me." Her smile faltered. "I can't. Not as I was. The flame has a price, Cale. It binds itself to the heart that called it." Realization dawned slowly, terrible and beautiful. "Then you're part of me now." She nodded, fading slightly as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. "Until the world no longer needs fire." He stood alone once more. But something inside him had shifted. The hollow was no longer empty, it burned with purpose. Days later, word spread through the packs. Varys had declared Cale fallen, a traitor to the moon, corrupted by witch fire. Hunters roamed the borders, seeking his head. Cale didn't hide. He couldn't. Each night, when he closed his eyes, her whisper guided him, through forests, through ruins, through nightmares. The bond between them pulsed like a second heartbeat. When the hunters finally found him at the edge of the old empire, Cale was waiting. His cloak rippled with silver flame. His golden eyes glowed beneath the fractured moon. "You hunt what you fear," he said, his voice echoing through the clearing. "But you forget, fear is just truth in disguise." The first wolf lunged. Cale moved like shadow and light combined, his claws catching the blade, his movements fluid, feral, divine. The fire didn't consume, it purified. Each strike burned the darkness from his enemy's eyes. When the last of them fell, Cale stood among the embers, breathing hard. The world was quiet again, almost reverent. "You spared them," Lyra's voice whispered. "They were lost," he said. "Not evil. That's why the moon chose you." He tilted his head toward the faint shimmer of her presence. "No. It's why I chose you." The air trembled, her laughter soft as rain. "Careful, Alpha. Love like that can change the world." "Then let it burn," he said. Weeks passed. The prophecy spread like wildfire among the packs, the blind alpha who saw the truth, the witch who became the flame. Some feared it. Some worshipped it. But those who believed began to gather. Wolves once divided by blood and border now walked under one moon, guided by whispers of mercy and fire. At the center of it all stood Kale, not as a god, not as a savior, but as a man who had learned to see through pain. One night, he climbed the cliffs overlooking the valley. The stars were sharp and countless. The air shimmered faintly, the same shimmer that always came when she was near. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "And you kept me alive," he answered. The silver light pulsed around him, wrapping his body like a second skin. "What now?" "There's more coming," she said. "The world remembers us now. And memory can be dangerous." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll remind it what mercy feels like." Her presence lingered, not as ghost, but as warmth, steady and fierce. The wind howled through the valley, carrying the faint scent of fire and moonlight. Kale closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of her voice in his blood, in the earth, in the stars. He whispered to the night, "Lyra, wherever the flame burns, I'll be there." And somewhere beyond the horizon, the fire answered. The prophecy had not ended. It had only begun. The fire dimmed into dying embers, its last tongues of light curling upward like breath leaving a body. The amphitheater lay broken around them, silent except for the crackle of heat devouring old stone. Lyra knelt where the fire had ended, Kale's body limp in her arms. His weight was heavy, real, the finality of it pressing against her chest like punishment. His skin was still warm. His golden eyes, once fierce as the sun itself, had gone still beneath the half-lowered lids. She brushed her fingers over them, closing them with a trembling touch. "Rest," she whispered, though the word cracked in her throat. "You've seen enough." Her tears fell. Not clear, but silver, shimmering as they hit the ground. Each one hissed against the ash, small bursts of light fading as quickly as they came. She didn't know if it was grief or magic that made them burn. Maybe both. Maybe there was no difference anymore. The night exhaled, the smoke curling upward into the pale light of dawn. A whisper rode the wind, not a voice, not entirely, but something old. Something that remembered. The blind alpha sees again, but love always demands a price. She froze, her heart stuttering. The words were neither blessing nor curse, just truth, stripped bare. The horizon began to glow. Soft, hesitant light stretched across the ruins, painting Kale's face in pale gold. Lyra traced the line of his jaw, her fingers shaking. "You said you'd die for me," she murmured. "You never said I'd have to live for you." The silence that followed was unbearable. The pack had scattered. The war had paused, if only because there was no one left to fight. All that remained was her heartbeat, uneven, breaking against the cold stone beneath her knees. Lyra lifted her gaze. The sky was bruised, purple fading into red, then into the faintest touch of gold. The kind of dawn that didn't promise peace, only continuation. She stood, her legs weak but unyielding. The wind tugged at her hair, whispering fragments of his name. And beneath that whisper came another. Her own voice, echoing in her mind, "Will you carry what he began, or let it die with him?" Her fingers curled. The silver light around her hands flickered, uncertain. Her power had always responded to emotion, to love, to loss. Now it trembled like a living thing caught between despair and defiance. Lyra stepped forward, looking toward the eastern horizon, the same direction Kale once said the moon sleeps before it's reborn. Her voice was barely audible, but it carried. "I'll burn the world if I must," she said. "But I won't let his death mean nothing." The wind rose, circling her, lifting ash and leaves into a spiral of light. The ruins shimmered. For a heartbeat, she could almost see him again, standing there, eyes bright with mischief and quiet strength, the faint smile that made her believe she wasn't cursed but chosen. Then he was gone. The illusion dissolved into air, leaving her alone with the echo of a promise. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? The words rose like narration born of the earth itself, intimate, piercing. Is she a savior, or a curse born of mercy? Lyra didn't know. Maybe both. Maybe every savior starts as someone the world misnames a curse. She turned once more toward the dawn, her eyes shining with the reflection of its uncertain light. If mercy is a sin, she said softly, then let me be damned. The sky broke open, the sun climbing through torn clouds, bleeding warmth over the ruins. The light hit her face, illuminating the tears still fresh on her cheeks, and for a moment, she looked not like a witch, not like a monster, but like the beginning of something divine. If this story stirred your heart, the voice murmured, softer now, closer, like breath against the listener's ear. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Because here, every tale burns, but never truly dies. The sound faded. The world seemed to exhale. But the story did not end there. As the light of morning reached its zenith, a flicker passed through the stillness. The fire that had burned out moments ago stirred, a pulse, faint but deliberate. The embers glowed once more, then brightened, then flared. Lyra stopped. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Cale. No answer. But the flames shifted, taking shape, first into a breath, then a shimmer, then a faint glow beneath his chest. And then, a heartbeat. The sound was soft at first, barely audible. Then stronger. Then impossible to deny. Lyra fell to her knees again, her breath caught between sob and disbelief. The fire wrapped around him, gentle this time, not to consume, but to renew. The light filled his veins, tracing golden paths beneath his skin. His fingers twitched. His lips parted. The air around him vibrated with something old and fierce and infinite. When his eyes opened, they burned brighter than before, molten gold, deeper than the sun. Cale, she breathed. He looked at her, disoriented, his voice rough and low. You thought I'd let you face the dawn alone? Tears broke free again, but this time they were laughter too, a fragile, disbelieving sound. She cupped his face, her hands trembling. You were gone. I was, elsewhere. His voice carried something new, a resonance that wasn't entirely his own. Between death and flame. She spoke to me, Lyra. The moon. She said the prophecy wasn't finished. Lyra froze. What do you mean? He stood, the embers swirling around him like living fire. She said, she is not the only one. The words chilled her, though his warmth still surrounded her. What does that mean? Before he could answer, a shadow moved across the ruins. A shape, tall, cloaked, neither man nor beast. The air crackled with energy unfamiliar and cruel. A voice emerged, deep and echoing, as though spoken from the mouth of time itself. She is not the only one, the true Alpha hasn't risen yet. Cale turned sharply, the golden light in his eyes flaring. Show yourself. The figure smiled, though its face was hidden. You think the story ends with mercy and love? No. Every flame calls its shadow. Every prophecy has its rival. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling through the ruins like the growl of ancient gods. Lyra stepped beside Cale, silver fire gathering in her palms. If you came for war. I came for balance, the figure interrupted. And balance demands blood. The wind screamed through the amphitheater. The ground shook. Cale pulled Lyra close, his voice low but steady. Whatever comes, we face it together. Her eyes met his, silver to gold, mercy to fire. Always. The lightning flashed again, blinding, vast, divine. And as the light swallowed them both, the voice of prophecy returned, softer now but more haunting than ever. The fire was never meant to die, only to change its bearer.